Julian Bigelow, who was the sort of the closest person working on computation with von Neumann, then became very bitter. It's a long story, but he wrote very little, but he explained that they all worked freely on this with very little compensation because they knew that this would revolutionize the world. Bigelow only died 10 years ago, and he left us with the supremely important point, which was that the time in the digital universe and time in our universe are completely different things. There really is no time as we know it in the digital universe. Although we call it a clock, it's not a clock. The digital computer is measuring the sequence of what happens next, but not with any restriction of time. And that's why the digital universe keeps going faster and faster. If you were one of Baricelli's organisms looking out, you would see our universe just slowing down. People would start moving slower and slower and slower. Which explains you don't need clocks, you only need counters. A clock keeps track of time, and a modern general purpose computer keeps track of events, and that's still true. And that's why there's this disconnect between the digital world and our world. Sequence is different from time, no time is there. So Bigelow was the last person to the machine when von Neumann died. They unplugged it, 12 midnight, July 15, 1958, off, and he signs his name. That's the last page in the logbook, and it never was turned on again. If you look at what they worked on, it's quite interesting. This is plotted on a scale of time in seconds, so it's 26 orders of magnitude in time. They worked on these 5 basic problems where, in a way, the math was the same, but the time scale was very different. Nuclear explosions that are over in millionths of a second, the shock waves, which is what happens in the next fraction of a second to a few seconds. They did a huge amount of work on meteorology, predicting hydrodynamics on the scale of hours, weeks, months. If it goes into years, it becomes climate. And then Baricelli worked on biological evolution on the order of hundreds of years. And Martin Schwarzschild worked on stellar evolution, the evolution of solar systems and galaxies. And when you contrast that to what we can perceive as human beings, the smallest interval we can perceive is sort of the blink of an eye, a third of a second, or an entire lifetime of say, 90 years. And the exact middle of what's perceivable is an 8-hour working day. And I do not understand whether this is it just an accident that we are sort of in the middle of this observable universe. And what the computer did, and what von Neumann wanted to do and succeeded beyond all his dreams, was sort of expand this so we could be aware of these very small intervals of time, and also of what's going to become more important. When we look at things like climate change, can we actually as a species become aware of what happens on long time scales? And just to get back to the humanists, von Neumann had a way of bringing anybody who had an interesting computational problem, he welcomed them to come and play on the machine. So he brought, it was effectively his last graduate student was a young grad student, Benoit Mandelbrot, who didn't fit in, who came to the Institute. Now, we know Benoit Mandelbrot from fractals. What's not widely known is that he developed it. He came to the Institute to study word frequency distributions. He picked 3 words, probably, sex, and Africa, and he studied their distribution across large bodies of text, and he found that the distribution was scale invariant, that probably was just evenly distributed. Certain books were all about, or sex would occur and it would be very frequent and then it would stop, and certain books would be all about Africa. And that gave me the idea of fractals, which made such a difference. So in the basement there, the boxes that nobody had looked at was, the next greatest find next to Clary's letters was a box that actually had the source code and the punch cards for one of Baricelli's universes, and with it a note from the engineer to Mr. Baricelli, there must be something about this code that you haven't explained yet. And that finally goes back to Turing's Entscheidungs problem. By looking at a code, can you tell what it's going to do? The answer is no. That's why no authoritarian government will ever be able to sort of close the digital universe and predict everything. So the attempts of the National Security Agency and so on are deeply flawed to try and sort of make the digital world safe for one political system or not. So Turing left us saying, what happens if we have unlimited ingenuity, so we have unlimited computing cycles which was a completely abstract idea in 1939. Now it's the real world. That's the number of transistors on a log scale, and that line has just kept in a straight line. So we now live in a world where it's on the order of 2 or 3 trillion transistors a second are added to this universe, and on the order of 5 to 7 trillion bits of this two-dimensional address space. We call it big data, but nobody seems to really know what big data is. So my definition of big data is what happened when the cost of storing information became less than the cost of making the decision to throw it away. So we live in a very different world where everything is being saved. It's actually harder to decide to throw something away than just to let it stay in memory. And that totally changes the future of the humanities, which is why we're all here. The digital humanities is going to be that's what's going to sort of define our new future. And I look forward to hearing in the next couple of days what some of you are up to. It's the world that Leibniz imagined that we now live in. And I've got to thank all the archives and people who let me have access to their documents. History is one of the only fields that's open to amateurs to make real contributions, and I'm forever grateful that I have a little email account at this institute, so if you send me an email there, you can send me a one-sentence email, and it will take up more memory than they had in the first place to do all that work. Thank you very much. We're going to take questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Graham Carr. I'm the outgoing president of the Canadian Federation for the Humanities and Social Sciences, and I have to say this has been just a fascinating short history of the digital universe that George has given us in the last half hour or so, ranging from sociology to technology to politics to personalities. I'm sure many of you have questions for George, and there will be an opportunity to speak to him outside following the talk. He'll be doing a book signing. We were going to have that in the basement to be consistent, but we've decided to put it in the lobby instead. And before I invite Jonathan back upstage to offer a token of appreciation to George and ask you to join us in thanking him, this is the last Big Thinking lecture of Congress 2013. And I want to use this opportunity to thank once again our partners, the Association of University and Colleges of Canada and the Canada Foundation for Innovation, who have supported all of the Big Thinking lecture series, as well as, of course, our fabulous hosts, the University of Victoria, the university, and it is a stunningly beautiful campus. The university and the people in the university really went above and beyond to make this an enormously successful Congress. I also want to thank and express our gratitude to Ray Siemens and the Digital Humanities Summer Institute for partnering with us on this event. And now I'll invite Jonathan Bankston back on stage to give George a token of our appreciation. Jonathan? Alors, merci à vous tous et toutes, et please join us outside for the book signing. Thank you all for participating in Congress 2013. For those of you who are continuing on with the Digital Humanities Institute or other parts of the programming, bon congrès, and next year in Brock.